everyone, I'm Andrea Ferretti, and this is Yogaland. Hi there, Jason.
Hi, Andrea.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
You're
We
very
are
welcome.
in our garage.
You're a very knowledgeable guest, so you're
Yeah.
welcome back anytime.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're starting a series of podcasts about pranayama and breathwork, and this is number one.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about why pranayama matters, why it's important, and a little bit about the benefits. And before we go into the meat of the discussion, I just want to do a quick little housekeeping shameless plug that you've got a pranayama course coming up. It's going to launch April 8th. It's going to be fabulous. It's going to go into much more detail with all of these things that we're talking about in this series. And if you want to find out more, you can go to jasonyoga.com/breathwork, join the wait list, and I'll send out some notifications and some info when we start to launch.
Can I just say how excited I am about it?
Of course.
So one of the things that I love as a yoga teacher is separate specialized environments where we can go deeper on a topic.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons that so many people do any kind of teacher training isn't just because they want to learn the material and become a teacher. It's because they want more time and greater depth in that thing.
Yeah.
And I know as a yoga teacher in any given class, there's only so much I can teach, right? But when we have these opportunities to go deeper and focus on a subject matter, it is so satisfying for me as an educator. And it's just so beneficial as a student.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been in a really nice, nerdy rabbit hole
Big time.
that I think you've been enjoying a lot.
I have been.
Yeah. And now I think you're ready to get it out into the world. You're at that point
Yes.
where you're you come up at the end of the day and your hair's a little fuzzy, like a mad professor. Like you've been in your lab, pouring concoctions together and you're ready to just launch the puppy. We're about there.
For sure true. Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the macro.
Yeah.
Why is pranayama important?
Okay. So really quick before why pranayama is important, we want to acknowledge that in historical traditions, pranayama was always seen as a more essential component of practice than asana.
Mm-hmm.
So I love asana. I'm not going to throw it under the bus. I love our physicality and I like to strengthen stuff and stretch stuff. It's all good. But both in the various hatha yoga traditions and also in the Patanjali yoga tradition, pranayama was considered to be a more powerful and a more efficacious set of modalities than asana. Asana was there to prepare you for pranayama. Pranayama was there to prepare you for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that from a very quick historical lens. In a modern setting, we can break it down into a handful of factors. Number one, pranayama is an immediate, direct access point to the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So our autonomic nervous system is broken into two parts, the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Both are really important, but oftentimes those two different components of our nervous system don't have a good balance and they don't have a good equilibrium. So the parasympathetic is often referred to as the rest and digest function, and the sympathetic nervous system is often referred to as the fight or flight, right? And again, we need to be able to toggle back and forth between the two. Pranayama immediately affects the central nervous system. So when we are trying to switch modes within, especially with regards to stress reduction, pranayama is a direct link to accessing the stimulation of either a rest and relaxation response or a wake up and get clear response. And a really simple metaphor or analogy, we can think a little bit of pranayama as like understanding how to use your thermostat on a heating and cooling system.
Mm.
You know how to turn it up, you know how to turn it down. And it has a more immediate effect on the central nervous system than asana does.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I love asana, do not get me wrong, but when we talk about value and what we can easily overlook, we can easily overlook the value of concerted, regulated, methodical breathing.
Okay. So I'm going to poke this a little bit, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Of course.
Most of us, I would say, when we're practicing asana, are doing ujjayi breathing.
Some of
So,
us are.
so let me just
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah.
is there a difference between, like you said, having a set sequence pattern of the pranayama that you're doing? Like, is it potentially more efficacious to sit and do pranayama versus the breathing that you're doing during asana?
I don't know that I want to. I
Go.
want us to think about these as both of these as exceptional tools,
Hmm.
and we want both at our disposal.
Right.
And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the most rigorously scientifically backed rate of breathing is 5.5 second inhalations and 5.5 second exhalations. It's very difficult in an active dynamic vinyasa practice to inhale for 5.5 seconds and exhale for 5.5 seconds.
Right.
You just don't have time. We move, even for me, who's a more, I would say I'm more on the slower side of vinyasa yoga and more the technical side of vinyasa yoga. And even for me, I probably inhale and exhale at a 2.5 to 3 count.
Hmm.
And so when we are moving, we're going to be breathing a little bit more quickly. And therefore, we're not going to actually get to that science data backed number
Hmm.
of 5.5 second inhalations, 5.5 second exhalations. We could do that in a yin practice, in a restorative practice, in something that isn't as overtly physically demanding, or we're not trying to keep pace with something else. But it would require the teacher to be overtly incorporating that technique, like maintaining that
Yeah. Yeah.
ratio,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
So
would also say, sorry,
please.
just jump in. I mean, I asked the question and then I kind of realized one of my own answers to it, which is I would also say that for the simple patterning, it is good to have the breath work be separate from the asana, because if you associate a calm nervous system with doing your asana practice and you're in a situation where you can't do 10 minutes of sun salutations, but you can sit and breathe quietly, if you've done a seated pranayama practice, you have that patterning. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So let me say this. Just for me as a vinyasa yoga teacher, probably the most important thing that I'm doing is teaching you pranayama, even in a vinyasa class.
Right.
However, in a movement based class, we're not going to hit that ideal duration with regards to modulating the autonomic nervous system. And then also, exactly what you're saying, there are many times in our life where we're not going to now get up and do Surya Namaskar.
Right. Or even like a 5-minute pigeon pose if you do it in your yin practice. You
Totally.
can't do that everywhere.
So for me, in terms of my personal practice, there's a lot of times I just do pranayama while I'm laying in bed for 10 minutes. And that is so unbelievably effective. So for me, it's not really an either or scenario. It's a realization of, wow, movement based breathing is amazing, and seated or reclined based breathing are amazing. And now that in the modern era we have access to both, and when we experience the value of both, there's no reason to have one or the other.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we talked about how it has a direct effect on the nervous system.
A regulating balancing effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about heart rate variability and how it
Yes.
affects that?
Yes. Okay, so let me describe heart rate variability, and then I'll put it in really simple terms.
Right.
So, heart rate variability is a measurement of consecutive heartbeats, typically over a 24-hour period. Okay. Now, for people that have Apple Watches or Whoop bands or Aura rings, like there's plenty of wearables in which you can monitor your heart rate variability for a different and shorter increment of time. Okay. But the gold standard of measuring one's HRV is over a 24-hour period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Heart rate variability, like I said, is a measurement of consecutive heartbeats. And over a 24-hour period, we want greater variability,
Right.
right? So, and I'll explain in a really simple way, just like a way we can think about this. But first, greater heart rate variability reflects a nervous system that can switch tasks and is more resilient and more responsive to the demand.
Right. It's flexible.
It's flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So heart rate variability is a way to infer your nervous system's ability to be flexible to the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really important quality of life. Forget yoga. This is a
Right.
really important quality of life
Mm-hmm.
thing. So let's stay with this for a little bit longer. If you think about a really good physiological day, in a really good physiological day, you'll have times of high output and high demand, and you'll have times of very deep, good rest. And in that situation, you can see, oh, there's variability in that heart demand.
Yeah.
In a nice, strong workout, if you will, your heart rate is higher. In deep rest, it's lower. You want both of those things, not one or the other, and you don't want to be stuck in the middle. You want to be able to accomplish both of those tasks. And so heart rate variability essentially describes, oh, in a 24-hour cycle, there was good variability because I worked hard and I rested deep.
Right.
That's what we want.
And I worked hard and I recovered
Yes.
like fairly quickly.
Yes. So the recovery, like the rest is integral for the recovery.
Right.
And so when we are in a more sympathetic dominant state, when we are in overdrive, if we're always up here, then it's very difficult for us to recover because we don't have enough amplitude. We're not getting into a quiet enough, deep enough state for our physiology to recover and repair.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, for me as a yoga teacher, let's broaden the scope even more. So many times, some of the best things we learn when we're new students about yoga are the most obvious, basic things, which is learn to be in the moment, learn to let go, learn to be responsive, learn to be adaptive, learn to be flexible, learn to deal with it. But we have to have a nervous system that has the capacity to do that. And sometimes people are locked into a nervous system dominance in which they can't relax, in which they don't relax.
Yeah.
They're in overdrive. And also the opposite can be true too. We don't really wake up. Too much sluggishness,
Brain fog.
too much brain fog, too much torpor. So when we think about our physiology in very basic, non-intimidating terms, we want to be able to be up and we want to be able to be quiet. And that is reflective of nervous system states that can be responsive,
Right.
where we're not stuck and we don't lack the capacity. And one of the most measurable upsides of a pranayama practice is it has been shown time and time again to significantly improve heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Probably because of its effect on down regulating the nervous system from an overstressed state to a more comfortable state, which then lets us work harder the next day. So it allows us to have this not up and down mentally and emotionally, but this physiological range.
I think I know I've told you this story, and I may have told this story on a previous podcast, but I'm going to tell it again because it was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. Sophia, for a while, our daughter, was doing some OT, some occupational therapy. And one of the things we were working on was just simply anxiety and stress, managing stress. So the OT hooked her up to biofeedback where she was looking at a screen and she could see how her HRV varied over time. And she could see it as a literal, like a wave
Yeah.
form.
Yeah.
And so the OT first had her watch it when she was just breathing normally, and she could see the number of the HRV at the bottom of the screen. And I will tell you, kids' HRVs are amazing.
They're good.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
And the OT said, I was like, mine is nowhere near that. Mine's like a fraction of that. And she said, when you hit 40, it's tough. Like you
Yeah.
really got to work on your HRV. Kids are much more plastic, right? So when she was breathing her normal rate, let's just say, I'm just throwing a number out there, her HRV was like 80. And then the woman put on a metronome and had her breathe. It was probably 5.5.
Yeah.
And it was like incredible. It went up to like 250.
It's amazing.
It was unreal. And for Sophie, for a kid, because people tell kids all the time, like all schools now know, like 3 deep breaths, like here's how you calm down, use your breathing. And kids are just like, what are you talking about? But for me to see how immediate the effect was on the nervous system was incredible. I want to get one of those for I want to do it every day with the biofeedback.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a gamification of it, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like to be able to, okay. So final thing about HRV, and then we should talk about CO2 tolerance too, because this is so fascinating.
Okay.
So final thing about HRV is that when we talk about feelings and nervous system states, we're almost always going to do it subjectively, which is totally fine. I'm going to tell you, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm grounded, I'm calm, whatever these things are. I am actually going to tell you all those things, and they pretty much bounce back and forth.
It's
like
why I fell in love with you.
I'm nervous.
Well, I was just like, you
I'm
get
calm,
me.
I'm nervous.
You get me.
Yeah. Okay, for sure. But the nice thing about understanding pranayama's effect on HRV is, HRV it is a more objective way of understanding some of the capacity of our nervous system to be able to switch states and to honor balance. And I don't want to get like too yoga-y, but there's a strong metaphorical correlation between ha, sun, and moon, ta. Like we want both, right? Yogis have always wanted both the sun and the moon, right? We don't, and I kind of have a little bit of I get like a little irritated, even though I said it, about referring to the sympathetic nervous system as the fight or flight, because that sounds inherently bad, like something we don't want.
But
You're not trying to get rid of it.
Right. We absolutely need it.
Absolutely. And there are pranayama techniques, especially Kapalabhati in Bhastrika, that are designed to facilitate stimulation of that part of our autonomic nervous system. So just kind of the idea, we want a balance between these, we want flexibility, and HRV improves with pranayama, and it is a relatively objective metric that we can understand and we can pretty simply transform with these practices.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to me about CO2, because I don't understand this one as much as I do HRV.
Okay. So why do you think you inhale when you inhale?
Because I need oxygen.
Wrong.
Okay.
100% wrong.
I knew that was going to be wrong, but I had to give it to you.
No, I know. Thanks for giving me that one. And that's like getting a volunteer. Does anyone ever want to volunteer? Oh, you, Sam. I've never met you, Sam. You've known Sam for 30 years, right? Like, how are you, buddy? Okay. So no one inhales when they inhale because they are oxygen deprived. You're not oxygen deprived unless you're drowning or suffocating or some awful thing. Even when you're working out hard, right? Like if you go to the gym, you see people huffing and puffing through their mouth, trying to like suck air in, they're not oxygen deficient. So the triggering mechanism for an inhalation, it's like this complex neurological pattern. But essentially, you have the desire to inhale when you inhale, not because you have low oxygen, but because you have high carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm.
And so CO2 tolerance is a reference to how tolerant your nervous system is to the carbon dioxide as it builds up in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And we need carbon dioxide to, okay, quick step back. So you have oxygen and you have carbon dioxide. The oxygen, so you inhale, air comes in through your nose, down through your trachea, through the bronchioles, and into what are called alveoli. They pass through the alveoli, through capillaries, and into the bloodstream. So your oxygen becomes bound to the hemoglobin in the bloodstream.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a lot.
No, I
Okay.
got
So,
you. I'm still
so
with
you
you.
have, you get your oxygen in the bloodstream,
Mm-hmm.
and it's bound to the hemoglobin. In order for that oxygen to be released from the hemoglobin and to be delivered to the cells to produce ATP or cellular energy, the carbon dioxide needs to essentially push it out of the bloodstream and unbinds the oxygen from the hemoglobin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
And is this making sense?
Yeah,
or am I-
totally.
okay.
No,
okay,
I'm still
okay,
with you. Yes.
Okay.
If I'm with
So-
you, that means everybody else is with you.
Okay. So we get air in, we have air into our bloodstream, but for that oxygen to be released from the bloodstream to fuel the cells, it needs to be unbound from the hemoglobin, and it's the CO2 that does that.
Mm-hmm.
So we want slower breath because when we have slower breath, more of the CO2 is building up, which means the CO2 can force the oxygen out of the bloodstream more efficiently. So oxygenation really has two phases. It's getting the oxygen in
Mm-hmm.
to the blood cells, but it has the second phase of being released from the bloodstream into the cells.
Right.
In order for it to be released, you have to have a buildup of the CO2.
Yeah.
And if you have a low CO2 tolerance, which makes you breathe more quickly, then the CO2 isn't building up well enough to efficiently deliver the oxygen from the hemoglobin into the cells. And so this is one of the reasons that hyperventilation is a profoundly inefficient form of breathing.
And it's why it makes you dizzy.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, so hyperventilation does not make you dizzy.
Well, because it's like the oxygen's not getting to the cells.
Yes, it doesn't make you dizzy or high because you have so much oxygen.
Right.
Okay. It's because you have so little CO2. And there's a vasoconstriction that's going to happen in the blood cells that spikes adrenaline. So usually when people do hyperventilation and they feel amazing, it's because they're on an adrenaline high because they had vasoconstriction. It's not because they had so much oxygen. That doesn't mean, I'm not here to litigate all techniques. It doesn't mean that hyperventilation techniques are inherently bad or can't be useful. They can be useful in some specific settings. But the point is, unintentional hyperventilation is never good. Shallow breathing is never good. Shallow breathing is never good, not because you're not getting enough oxygen in. It's because you're not getting enough carbon dioxide to build up to make that oxygen efficiently delivered to the cells. So going back all the way to pranayama, you don't have to make your breath, you don't have to like inhale for 20 minutes and exhale for 40 minutes, right? You don't have to have, that's obviously impossible, right? But you don't have to have some ridiculously long breath. But training yourself to lengthen the exhalation gives more time to build up that CO2
Hmm.
in order for the oxygen to be delivered more efficiently.
Hmm.
So take away from that, from all of that thing,
Mm-hmm.
slower breathing helps your nervous system have more tolerance for CO2, which in turns help you learning to breathe more slowly builds more tolerance to breathe more slowly,
Hmm.
which creates more efficient oxygenation of the air coming in and also being released into the cells. So you have a much more efficient delivery mechanism when you have more CO2 buildup.
That's amazing.
Totally amazing. And it's also why it doesn't matter how hard you're working, try not to breathe through your mouth. Like maximum hit workout, try not to breathe through your mouth.
Wait, but did we talk about why? Did we talk about why?
Okay, let me pause because I don't want to freak anyone
I know.
out.
I don't
There are going to be some
want to go in a rabbit hole either.
Okay. Inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your nose is a more efficient way of managing your rate of breathing. Let's say I'm doing Pilates, or let's say I'm doing some powerlifting. I might want to do a controlled exhalation through my mouth because I'm focusing on engaging my abs, or I'm focused on like bracing, right? There's going to be scenarios where, of course, exhaling through the mouth is totally fine. But when we're focused on oxygen efficiency and CO2 tolerance, we want to control the rate of breathing. And controlling the rate of breathing through the nose is just always easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, on a practical level, can we talk about some of the benefits, like, maybe any insights that you may have had when you really realized breath work was important?
Yeah. So let me say this really quick and make it so simple. So all of the kind of sciencey tech part that we just talked about is interesting to me, to you, hopefully to some, but it's not necessary to know any of those things
Mm-hmm.
to do or practice pranayama. And so getting to your point, like the question that you just asked, pranayama practice is so simple. It can be brief, it can be simple. For me, a lot of times my pranayama practice is 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say 5 to 10 minutes of me doing a simple breathing technique with regards to my focus, my mood, my relaxation, my release of stress is more effective for me than any 5 to 10 minutes of asana I've ever done. So it is simple and it is efficacious in spite of the perhaps complex physiology.
Sure.
So for me, I was actually trained to practice pranayama in the Iyengar yoga tradition. And pranayama in the Iyengar yoga tradition is very specific and very technical, as you would imagine it is, but it's also very withholding.
Yeah.
It's very withholding. Okay. So someone asked one of my teachers once, when should we start a pranayama practice? And his answer, which I'll always remember, he said, when you can look back at the last year of your life and know that not one single day did you miss an asana practice, then you can do a pranayama practice. So let's not
I
go
love my Iyengar teachers,
Same.
but I can say confidently that they are in part why I never practiced pranayama.
Yes.
There's so much fear, lore,
So much.
gatekeeping around it.
So much gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Right. And okay. Quick moment on that. Now, I think that there's the logic of that gatekeeping. Number one is it's a very hierarchical system.
Sure.
It's a very patriarchal hierarchical system. That's just the reality. So you're going to get some gatekeeping. Number two, pranayama because it is a direct access point to your nervous system, should be learned in a methodical environment, right? And then another reason that pranayama is a little bit more withholding in that lineage and some other lineages is because it's more subtle,
Hmm.
right? And so I can understand the inclination. Look, it goes direct to the nervous system, and also it is subtle, so we need to have good technique. And that being said, slowing your breath down for 5 minutes is a really good thing to do for everybody.
And sometimes you learn subtlety by practicing it, not
100%.
by waiting until you're good enough in quotes to practice
Yeah.
it.
So getting back to
Yeah.
so my background, I mean, I started a pranayama practice 30 years ago. I have not been hugely consistent with over the years. It's waxed and waned a lot over the years. But I was very consistent. I had more or less a daily pranayama practice for the 2 years that I was doing training,
Hmm.
a little over 1,000 hours. There were a couple hundred hours of pranayama. And I have to say that of all the techniques and all of the different ratios and durations that I was taught and exposed to, the ones that have always worked for me are the basic ones.
Hmm.
They're the inhale for 4 seconds, pause for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, pause for 4 seconds.
Hmm.
They're the 5.5 second inhalation. They're the 5.5 second exhalation. There's the little bit of Kapalabhati, Bhastrika to get thing moving, right? So for me, I've always had an exposure and a training in pranayama, but I think that I did not value it nearly as much for those 30 years as I have for the last year.
Hmm.
And for the last year, as I've just embraced the consistency and the simplicity.
Hmm.
And this is such a big part, right? Like I'll just go ahead and say this, and whatever. We've already said that Iyengar's withholding, which is totally true. It's withholding when it comes to pranayama. I just want there to be a place that is like between, oh my God, you can never practice pranayama or you're going to have a heart attack, and let's go to the breathing place and have someone yell at us for 45 minutes while we hyperventilate and listen to loud music. There's somewhere in between.
We have a few of those around us.
Yeah. And again, like both of those extremes in a way have their place. Okay? They do. I'm not really castigating either of those extremes. But for me,
Right.
neither of them
Work.
resonates.
Yeah.
And for me as a yoga practitioner and as a yoga teacher, I'm between those places.
Hmm.
And there's so much science-backed research with non-yoga practitioners as to how effective and efficient basic pranayama is, right? And so I have so much more appreciation now that I'm just not as wound up
Hmm.
about it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm going to have this daily practice. It's going to be somewhere between 5 and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's going to be once or twice a day. It's either going to be seated, or if I'm tired and stressed out, I'm just going to lay in my bed and do it.
Right.
And just understanding now that I have so much more of a physiological and anatomical understanding, I don't want to sound arrogant. I've always understood the techniques. Like I was taught so many techniques so well for so long that I've always been proficient in understanding of the techniques. But now that I understand the physiology and the mechanism of why different techniques work differently and how we can actually make these techniques really available and
Hmm.
really accessible for students of every experience level to improve the quality of their lives, I just have so much more appreciation for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
I think when you mentioned that it's nice because it doesn't add a ton of complexity to your life or your practice,
Yeah.
I can definitely attest to that. I mean, I've only been adding it to my practice for a couple months. And at first I started just in the morning, just for 5 minutes. And now I want to do it all the
Mm.
time. It's because it's so simple.
Yeah.
And because you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
And because you only need 5 minutes. And because for me, I get stressed really easily. Like since I've been doing it, I notice how quickly I go into a stress response state. It's like I was telling the OT the other day, she and I have kind of become friends. Like I now notice that in order for me to get my work done in quotes, I conjure this stress response immediately. And now that I know that that's not really very good for, I mean, of course I've known this forever, but I just didn't quite notice it to the point where I notice it now. It's like, oh, okay, I probably should do little bits more often throughout the day until I'm better at maintaining less of an intense stress state all day long. So
Absolutely.
anyway, it's just,
I want to share really quick before you have another, we have another talking point or two. There are a couple of environments that I have been doing pranayama a little, like adding it to my life, is driving to and back from jujitsu.
oh, great.
So on the way there, I do 10 minutes of usually a box breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So like those of you that only speak pranayama and don't speak, if you speak breath work,
It's
it's
box
it's
breathing.
box breathing. If you speak pranayama, it's samavriti ujjayi pranayama with kumbhaka, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what box breathing does is it is a good pranayama technique to do prior to effort because it starts to set you up for CO2 tolerance.
Mm.
Because if you think about it, like I'm going to simplify everything I said about CO2 tolerance
Mhm.
earlier. You can think about CO2 tolerance as just being able to spend a longer period of time before you inhale,
Mm-hmm.
right? Before you initiate the next inhalation, a longer period of time. So if you do box breathing and if you just do 4 seconds for each phase, then you have a 16 second breathing cycle. 12 of those seconds, you're building up your CO2 tolerance because 12 of every 16 seconds, you're not inhaling.
Mm-hmm.
And so for like a stronger workout demand, that's a nice little prep,
Right.
right? It's also for me very focusing and it's not stressful. I'm not doing some complicated stressful technique while I'm trying to navigate, Interstate 5,
Right.
which I
Right.
don't recommend,
Right.
right?
No.
Okay, everybody, don't do anything dumb,
No,
right?
no. Yeah, of course.
Okay. And then on my way home, it's helping me recover. So what I've been doing on my way home is a 2 parts, 1 part in breath to 2 part out breath. So 5-second in breath or 6-second in breath to 10 or 12 seconds out breath. What that's doing, because jujitsu is very SNS, it's very sympathetic nervous system.
Right.
Like it is very charging.
Mm-hmm.
And right. So I want that variability. I want to come down.
Mm-hmm.
I want my heart rate to come down. I
Mhm.
want to start to initiate that recovery cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get out of that sympathetic dominance and get more into, oh, okay,
Right.
I just survived that 90 minutes. Let's take it down.
Mm-hmm.
So I want a lengthened exhalation breathing.
Mhm.
And again, these are simple techniques,
Mhm.
right? These are simple techniques. And I just do them for 10 minutes,
Mhm.
right? And the drive is 20 minutes. I do it for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
It's
that's
perfect.
cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into a little bit about the techniques. I mean, you've kind of
Sure.
touched on the fact that that different types of breath work have different effects. Some
Yeah.
can be stress reducing. I would say the 3 biggest areas that have been studied are stress reduction, sleep, helping with sleep, and focus.
Yes.
Okay. So having said that, there are 3 categories of breath work. So talk through those.
Let's talk about it. We're speaking, let's stay a little bit with this bilingual breathwork, pranayama.
Okay.
They're the same thing, but breathwork is kind of I'm in a modern era. I'm talking about breathing. I'm saying box breathing, and I'm talking about heart rate variability and parasympathetic response. We can also continue to speak pranayama, which is the same thing. It's just a different language with a slightly different concept. So what you have in a more traditional environment, like speaking pranayama, of all of the pranayama techniques, they're essentially broken down into 3 different types. Okay. And different lineage categorize things slightly differently, but generally speaking, in a more traditional perspective, you have 3 different types of pranayamas. You have samavritti pranayamas. Those are pranayamas that are equal ratios. So the in-breath and the out-breath are the same. And if there are pauses, they are the same. Okay? So samavritti pranayamas, there are many of them, but again, that is an equal ratio. And you can kind of default to that being a balanced way of breathing. The equation's balanced. The amount of duration on an in-breath, the amount of duration on the out-breath is the same. And those tend to be very fundamental breathing approaches. In modern language, those samavritti pranayamas are often just basic nervous system balance breathing techniques. So in a more historical setting, you're looking to create a balance between the Ida and the Pingala nadi, or between your heat and your cold, right? And in a modern setting, we're really thinking about a balanced breathing technique for the nervous system, equally stimulating of sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Okay.
Right? Kind of continuing to play with this. You also have, in a more traditional setting, Visamavriti pranayamas. Visamavriti pranayamas means the ratio of in-breath and out-breath are not the same. The ratio of out-breath is almost always longer. So if we think about that in a modern setting, these are more relaxation, recovery, sleep-based breathwork techniques. And in this situation, again, whether you want to think about it in a historical language or modern language, you're making the exhalation longer, which is intended to stimulate the parasympathetic response and induce a greater state of comfort and relaxation.
Okay.
And then you also
it's parasamavritti.
Oh, no.
Sorry,
Okay.
what is it called
So
again?
sama means equal.
Right.
Vritti means wave.
Yeah.
Pranayama.
So that one's regulating.
Yeah.
Second
so
category.
samavritti pranayama.
First
equal
category.
in-breath, equal out-breath, balance.
Okay.
Those are fundamental balanced pranayamas.
Yes. Second category.
Second category is visamavriti. Visamavriti.
Okay.
So unequal, or like unequal or against the natural order, like kind of against the grain. And there's different techniques, but for the most part,
Calming.
we're dealing with ratios where the exhalation is longer.
Okay. And for the most part, this is the calming category.
Yeah, this is the I'm coming home from training.
Okay.
This is the I just got an MRI and found out that everything in my shoulder that can be torn is actually torn. So we're gonna lengthen that exhalation a little bit more.
Did you do some deep breathing on the way home today from the?
No.
Okay. All right.
No.
We'll do that later.
Yeah.
Third category.
Third category is often a subcategory of Visamavriti pranayamas, but these are kriyas, right? So in the Iyengar yoga world, you have kriya yoga pranayama techniques, right? And okay, and again, one of the things, listeners, especially listener, if you have spent a lot of time in studying Kundalini yoga or studying integral yoga or studying uh, Shivananda yoga, different traditions have different names for the same things, which can be confusing, right? But essentially, here's the bottom line, and then I'll make it all simple. Kriya pranayamas tend to be very stimulating pranayamas. They are things like Kapalabhati, and they are things like Bhastrika that are short, kind of like burst, strong, pumping air where you're not really using the diaphragm. You're kind of like bypassing it through what you're doing with your abdomen. So these, in a historical and a modern setting, are really the wake up style of pranayamas.
Mm-hmm.
These are the I have brain fog, or I'm ruminating, or I am down.
In deep fatigue or down.
I
Yeah.
just can't. I have deep fatigue, and it's not the time to just go with it. I gotta function right now.
Yeah.
I gotta get it up and move. So these are more of like the awakening and the clarifying techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to be these Kapalabhati Bhastrika types.
Mm-hmm.
So really simple. You have breathing techniques where your ratios of the in-breath and the out-breath are equal. Those are fundamental balancing techniques. They're everyday techniques. They work for everyone all the time. You have techniques that are more oriented towards rest, recovery, relaxation, de-stressing. And in these, your exhalation is going to be longer than the inhalation. And then you have techniques that are more about being awakened, stimulated, being a little bit more clarifying. And these are more Bhastrika, Kapalabhati. These are actually more like hyperventilation techniques,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. Is like, oh my God, we got to wake this system up. And that's the context and scenario in which a hyperventilation technique can be done and can be completely sensible and helpful for people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's wrap up
Yeah.
by talking about just high level how you can start to incorporate this into your own practice or into your teaching.
So what I've done in my course, like, cause I needed to, this was the first question that I started with when I was creating this course. Okay. Which is, how are people going to use it? Before like any of the science and the techniques and the skills and the challenges and so forth, my first question is someone going to do this? And is it going to be practical for them as a student and as a teacher? And how do I make it so? So I think both with regards to being a teacher and incorporating it into your classes, or just being a student and wanting to learn more about these techniques, I think we have two great options. Number one, as a student and as a teacher, I think you want to start to think about incorporating pranayama techniques for 5 minutes in any given class. And you can do that at the beginning of class, or you can do that towards the end of class. And there are different techniques that we can utilize. But essentially what we need to do in this scenario is, number one, realize 3 to 5 or 6 minutes of pranayama is incredibly helpful
Mm-hmm.
for everybody. It's incredibly helpful for students. And honestly, like I was referring to earlier, there are a lot of studios around the world now that are just breathing studios.
Mm-hmm.
And they're oftentimes associated with like a cold plunge and right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is more, I would say there is more global modern interest
Yeah, it's
in
really interesting.
breathwork
Mm-hmm.
now than any time I have witnessed as a teacher.
I think it's between Wim Hof and James Nestor's book.
For sure.
They've really have these sub communities that have made it into the mainstream and
For sure.
have spread the word, which is great.
For sure. And so the reason that I bring that up is because as a yoga teacher, we're always a little scared to change things up, or we're scared to do something more subtle. We're like, do people care? And the answer is, I don't know. But yeah, probably, because guess what? They're going to feel better afterwards.
Right.
So just like maybe they didn't love every pose that you did in the sequence, but they feel better afterwards. Whether someone loves every moment of a 5-minute pranayama at the end of class, pretty much guaranteed they're going to feel better, especially if you stick to simple, repeatable techniques,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that's the first thing to do as a teacher. You just say, it might be in all of your classes. You might just pick one. Like my Saturday class that I used to go to with Richard Rosen back in the day at Piedmont Yoga Studio, his Saturday class had 15 minutes of pranayama at the end. That was it. There was
Did
no,
he do the same? Do you recommend that a teacher like picks one and they get comfortable doing that one for a while?
I,
Did he do the same one? Did you expect the same one?
I would say you almost want to make pranayama like sun salutations.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is like they just be simple.
Hmm.
Just sun salutations work. Of course, we like to spice up and change our sun salutations and add varieties, but you essentially have a core sun salutation or two or three that you come back to a lot.
Hmm.
So from a technique, and these are the things that I teach in the course, but from a technique, you want somewhere between 1 and 3 techniques, and you just do those. This is really simple. You do
Okay.
them for 5 minutes, and it has an immediate effect on the nervous system. People are going to be dropped in. Okay. So I would say the same thing for developing your own practice. And this is again one of the great things of you can do 5 minutes of pranayama pretty much anywhere, pretty much anytime. And it is going to affect you.
Yeah.
The other way, and so there's a lot of that built into the course, right? Of like how to do that, what are the techniques, and there are many different 5-minute practices. Okay. The other way as a teacher to teach this is as its own separate series, right? Everybody, there's one of the things I'm always thinking about as a yoga teacher is what's going to be interesting for me to practice teaching. Like with all due respect, saying exhale chaturanga, inhale up dog, I'm fine with that. But I've done that for 30 years. So that's not like that phase of teaching is not at the leading edge of inspiration for me.
Hmm.
So for me to continue to be inspired, I keep learning, I keep practicing, I keep studying and inquiring in different ways. So one of the things that you can do as a teacher is to offer a series. And so in this training that I've created a fundamentals 6-part 30-minute series. I should say this, 6 30-minute fundamental pranayama practices.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 30-minute fundamental pranayama
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah. I've created a
It's
series.
essentially something, that they can teach.
Yeah, that they can teach. Or it can give them an idea and they can,
Sure.
right?
Make it
So
their
like
own.
in this course, you do the 6 30-minute fundamentals classes and you can teach them.
Hmm.
And so as a teacher, you can teach that in person, you can teach that online. So you have the two options, which is start to integrate pranayama for 3 to 6 minutes in your existing classes or an existing class by picking one of 3 techniques, simple, or offer a series
Right.
and have it be standalone,
Right.
right? And then you don't have to worry a moment about, am I boring people by saying inhale
They
and
signed up
exhale
to
and
be
fill the
there.
balloon and blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And as a teacher, everything that I teach in this course, including like if anyone didn't quite get the heart rate variability or any of those things, go back and listen to this same podcast a time or two again, and you'll oh, okay, I get it. Like
Oh, sure. Yeah.
it's all understandable. And
Yes.
once we understand some of the basic mechanisms, and when we stick to pranayama techniques that are not super exotic, they work for everybody.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's not that difficult.
I mean, if our 12-year-old can immediately see a change in her heart
Yes,
rate
exactly.
variability.
If an untrained 12-year-old can do 5.5-second inhalations, 5.5 exhalations, and see a significant improvement in a measure that infers the quality of her nervous system at the time, so can your students.
Yeah.
So those are I think those are the two ways: teach them a series and or include it in your
Start with 5 minutes.
start with
in
5
your
minutes.
regular class.
It can just be 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. It makes me happy to think of more people teaching this again, more people caring about it.
You and I have been through a lot. We've been in the yoga world in a lot of ways for a long time.
For our entire adult lives.
Yeah. And more than, my God. Yeah.
I mean,
Anyways.
yeah, starting with college, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point I want to get to is, I think in so many ways, we just want to improve the people, like the quality of our students' lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, for me, as a yoga teacher, this is just another part of the toolkit.
Mhm. Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
really simple, actually.
So next episode, we're going to talk about more deeply about the effects of pranayama on sleep and stress and relaxation. So that'll come, I think, next week, or are we going to do 2 this week? We might do 2 this week.
That will come within the week.
Okay.
That'll come within the week. Oh, can I say one more thing too?
Sure.
Because I keep forgetting. I should have said it at the beginning. If you're watching this on YouTube, please please subscribe. I know everyone says it. I know it's annoying to do. Please do it. It really helps with YouTube's ability to want to share this content.
Okay.
Same thing on Spotify, all those things. Comment, hit the like button, especially if you've made it this far.
Okay.
Yes, you've made it this
do
far.
one more little thing.
Yeah, if you've made it this far, just do the thing.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Again, if you want to learn more about the upcoming pranayama class, I'll start that again. Okay. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, if you want to learn more about the upcoming pranayama class, go to jasonyoga.com/breathwork, enter your email, and we'll send you all the info as soon as we've got it all gathered together. That's my job. He's already done his part. I've got to get it all ready for you all to take in and understand. And we're looking forward to talking about more pranayama next week.
Yeah.
So until next week, enjoy your pranayama practice.